And you are listening to Serf City on CFMH 107.3 FM, and I'm Mark Leger. And in the studio now we have Luisa Montoya, and she is the new coordinator of the MNRC, which is opening in a couple of weeks in the city market. And we also have Paul-Emile Chasson, and he is the board chair, and he's also the education coordinator here at UMBSJ. How are you doing, folks?
Very well, thank you for having us.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, and thanks a lot for being able to come in, and I appreciate you coming into a couple weeks before the center opens. You know what I'd like to do actually before we talk about the center itself and the grand opening you have planned in a couple weeks, I want to just talk a little bit about your personal backgrounds. And Luisa, I had mentioned in my intro that you're from Colombia, so why don't we just start a little bit by talking about what life was like in Colombia for you, where you lived, what your day-to-day life was like.
Well, I lived in Bogota, which is a pretty big city, about 10 million people. I moved out of Colombia due to political unrest when I was 14, and I came via Beijing. I did some traveling. And when I was living in China, my sister started going to university at UMBSJ. So I decided to come to Canada, and I didn't really know much about St. John. But it was a different change for me, from coming from a big city, going to a very big university, to a smaller place. But I have to say that was one of the best changes I've made in my life, for sure.
Was coming to St. John?
Absolutely.
When you were living in Colombia, you see you left when you were 14. In your environment, how would you have perceived at that age, at 14, the political situation there? Was it?
Well, at that point, it was one of the worst stages of Colombia, we call it narco-terrorism. A lot of problems with Pablo Escobar, which a lot of people know in North America. So at that point, it was just a massive exodus of people from Colombia going to different places to study, to work, just trying to find a way out. It was, as I say, a very stressful time, but I think Colombians always find humor with everything. So it was also a great time for music. Música Protesta, which is political music. It was a great time for the arts, but it's a very different experience going to a place where you cannot go to the movies, you cannot walk alone to the corner to buy milk. So it was refreshing to leave that environment for me.
Now you would have gone to somewhere, you would have gone initially to Beijing. Why did your family go to Beijing?
Well, actually, initially we went to the United States. I went to Binghamton, upstate New York, for an exchange student, high school, because we were too young. Then eventually, it's a long trip around the world before arriving to St. John. Then I went back to Colombia for a year and a half, then I went to France, then I went to Beijing for university. Then I came to St. John.
Wow, so you have a lot of experience settling into new places and very different places when you talk about Colombia, United States, France, Beijing, St. John.
Yes, it's been as I say, a long round trip. Yeah. And since I came to St. John, I've left once to go to Sweden for work, and I've come back. So it's been a challenge, and I've given me much bigger understanding of the challenges to settle into a new place, making new friends, making a new life.
So coming to St. John, what year was that?
I first came in 1998.
Right. So take us back to that time just for a minute. What was it like for you to settle here when you first arrived? What were some of the things that challenged you about St. John? What were some of the things that were surprisingly easy?
Well, I have to say St. John has changed a lot in the past 11 years. When I first came to 1998, for example, if we wanted to go out to eat, it was mostly pub food. There were not many ethnic restaurants, not too many things going on. It was very sad walking in the urban core. It was almost empty all the time. There were not many activities. But at the same time, it was so peaceful. People were so friendly. There was so much potential everywhere. It was so nice to be able to ask a bus driver, where am I going, where I'm lost, and they would call someone, help you, tell you exactly which bus to take. So it was such a different experience coming from a big city.
Was it, now I know that a lot of immigrants that I talk to do mention that it's a very friendly city to come to, and that people on the street are very friendly, but it is a little bit difficult to penetrate the culture here in terms of becoming good friends with people and being invited into people's homes. That can be a bit of a challenge. Did you find that when you originally moved here that kind of settlement for you was hard? Like,
Well, I was very fortunate. My sister was here a year before, so I already had somewhat of a network. She had a much harder time than I did, for example. And as you say, people are very friendly, and you do have that exterior sense of amicability, and it is more difficult to make what you'd call your first Canadian friend. And after you break into those settled communities, it gets easier, but because a lot of St. Johners go from high school to university together as a group, it's very difficult to break into that pattern. It was difficult for me as well.
now you've had to settle into a lot of different places, from the States to Beijing to St. John and to France, Sweden. I mean, there's a number of very different countries. Are there similarities and differences, or do you encounter the same challenges wherever you go?
Well, you encounter them to a different extent. I think my experience, I have to say, is very different than a lot of immigrants because I visually don't look different. And a lot of people assume I'm French. So it is different from that perspective because you can go undetected very much in St. John or Sweden. While in China you feel much more of you're different. You don't belong to any of the communities. It was much harder for me to adapt to China than it was, for example, to St. John. In the United States, I had a challenge. It was a very small city, so it was even harder to penetrate into the inner groups. But there are a lot of similar things. You are the foreigner. You are a newcomer. You don't know anyone. You are foreign to the city. But I did find it much easier to settle to St. John than to any of the other countries.
And now when's the last time you were back in Colombia?
I was back in December.
Okay.
For Christmas.
And you left when you were 14. You've gone back periodically since. How is it different from your experience when you were young?
Colombia has changed for the better, I think. When you go to Bogota, you can actually, things that seem simple, you can actually go out to dinner without having to worry, which we take for granted in St. John. You can actually walk alone at night, not everywhere, but in some places. So you can travel in your car, you can go to a farm, you can go outside of the city without being worried you're going to be kidnapped. So it has changed completely from when I was 14.
Yeah, because there can be that perception, particularly from North America, that it still is a dangerous place, but it has changed a lot.
Well, it is still a dangerous place depending where you go. There is a lot of isolated rural communities that's still very dangerous, and unless there is new infrastructure, they are going to remain that dangerous. And they're still there. I mean, I guess we have to be clear about it. Tourism is better, and the core cities and the touristic places are much safer.
Right, so it's more some of the rural places and out of the way areas. Because I know when I was down in Panama a few years ago, we were told to stay away from the Panamanian-Colombian border, but that because it was probably close to more rural, out of the way places.
Well, absolutely, and in the Panama-Colombia border is also jungle, so there's no infrastructure. There is many places to hide for different forces. There's a lot of fighting going on, but it's different in the cities.
Right. So there's a lot of hope for you with your country.
Absolutely, there's always hope, and I hope that eventually I'll be able to work in nonprofits in Colombia.
Yeah. Now so you left when you were 14 because of those troubles. Do you see yourself ever moving back permanently there?
Well, I have to say I've become very accustomed to the comfortable San John life. I do enjoy a smaller city. Don't enjoy the weather. Sometimes certain winters do make me think about going back.
And then the fog.
And the fog. But my husband is from St. John. I have what I call my family here. My family of friends, my family of Canadians of different countries. This is my home now.
Now, Paul, Antigonish is not Colombia. Fred is not Colombia, but tell us, what has the settlement experience been like in St. John for you?
Well, as you can imagine, it's been much different than Luisa's experience, obviously. I came in the early 80s and was actually my wife.